Welcome, fans, to a live and inaugural edition of the Cheap Heat Productions podcast. My name is Jack Kilby, and I'm here to welcome a man who I'm very pleased to have as the first guest on this show, a man who was a big, bright spot in the latter period of the AWA, but he has been in many territories, worked for many companies, has so many great stories. A man who really has, in a lot of ways, through his stories and his discussion of his career, opened a lot of eyes to what he accomplished and what he represents in terms of that old school business. I would be talking about, after a lengthy preamble, none other than the illustrious one, Jonnie Stewart. John, thanks so much for coming on.
Jack, thank you for having me on. I am without a doubt able to tell you and your viewers the other two interviews that you and I did, it was like therapy. I mean that sincerely. You know, I've talked very brutally honest about myself and my colleagues and my peers and contemporaries and the business itself, good and bad. And I just want to tell you before we start, what a great cathartic like therapy that the other two interviews were for me. So I appreciate that, and your viewers.
Well, I think the viewers of the Cheap Heat Productions Network will get the full experience of what you bring to the table, and then some. I personally enjoyed the fact that you were so forward in your discussions. You didn't pull any punches, but just told it like it is, to quote Jesse the Body. For those fans that may be a little bit younger than us, could you just briefly lay out the fact that how you came into the industry through a sports background, and then of course got that big exposure for the AWA when they were on ESPN, and then we're gonna shift and play the name game in terms of the territories that you worked, and I'm just gonna hit you rapid fire.
I'm excited about that, by the way. I really am. You're gonna be dredging up a lot of memories. 12 years old. My father is a local Chicago automobile dealer. Gets tickets from a car dealer that sponsored pro wrestling. We go down to the amphitheater. It's Dick the Bruiser, Ernie the Cat Lad, Spike Huber, who I looked like when I was younger with my curly blonde hair, Paul Christie. And I remember being 12 years old going, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. This is going to be one of the things I'm going to do with my life. And it's a very common thing with someone that's a astronaut, a pilot, a fireman. You see something when you're younger, it grabs you for whatever reason. And so I initially got in the right way. I did it for love and passion, and took an invited walk-on scholarship to Memphis State, now the University of Memphis, in 1985, because someone told my dad. My dad told me that pro wrestling there was a pro wrestling school down there, and wrestling was very popular down in Memphis. Now, folks, in 1985, getting into pro wrestling, you've heard Al Snow and many others talk about it. It was like entering the mob, in my opinion. Being from Chicago and knowing a million mobsters, it was harder to enter the mob because the mob was, are you going to come in and follow the rules? Pro wrestling was, if we let you in, will you keep the secret? That could destroy the industry. One expose could destroy the industry. So harder to get into pro wrestling than the mob in 1985. I started spring practice for Memphis State. A fraternity brother sees the legendary Memphis wrestler Buddy Wayne, now deceased, in a grocery store, and he's all excited. He's like, there's a guy here. He's from Chicago. He came to play football, but he wants to be a pro wrestler, and that's why he's down here. And Buddy Wayne was, okay, calm down. Here's my phone number. And they exchanged numbers. I met with Buddy Wayne. He wadayed me. And and for a couple of weeks, I was invited backstage for Monday night at the Coliseum. What an education. Bill Dundee, Dutch Mantel, Buddy Landell, Jerry Lawler, uh, Tanaka, Paul Diamond, Joe LeDuc, on and on and on. What a plethora of interesting talent that kind of looked at me side eye because I would go into the matches and yell at these guys. Now I'm standing backstage and trained with Buddy Wayne, but did it the right way. The wrestlers saw me take the ring down, put the ring up at the spot shows. I took the ring down and put it up in Buddy Wayne's backyard to train. And the wrestlers knew that about me. And so they accepted me. And they accepted me because I was taught how to throw a Memphis punch correctly. And just started there. From Memphis, I went to Dick the Bruiser, WWA, for the summer of 1987. Then started the Windy City Wrestling in Chicago with Sam DeCiro and Sonny Rogers and Alan Eppenstein. And this wasn't an independent wrestling promotion. Sam DeCiro was the Chicago Vince McMahon, and I will never take that away from him. Yes, we did some high schools, and yes, we did some civic auditoriums. Our home stadium was the famed International Amphitheater, which was our Madison Square Garden. And we routinely had 35, 45, 55, 52, 5,700 people at the amphitheater, great promotion. And from there, I was recruited by Jim Barnett for WCW. Ric Flair rescinded a 4-year, $600,000 contract. And then I ended up with the AWA, Vern and Greg. And in between all of that, I went to Singapore for Steve Ricard and Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and Jakarta, Indonesia. I wrestled in Wings. I know, little faggoty little Jonnie Stewart in Wings with barbed wire flame matches. And Jack, we know how that ended with a fight with Corporal Kirshner. And then started AWA Wrestling Superstars with AWA executive Dale Gagne. Literally became the third biggest promotion in the country for 8 years. There were some nights we had 3 towns and 3 cities. I'm not lying. I'm not joking. We hired all of the big name. We had the largest single payday in the history of independent wrestling when we paid The Rock $32,000 for an autograph signing at a Bally's fitness center in Brooklyn. From there, we routinely, if we had 1,500 people, it was to us, it was a waste. We routinely had 5,000 people attend our sold shows. We were not we sold shows, and then we co-promoted with the local promoter, and we used everybody from Sergeant Slaughter, Junkyard, George the Animal Steel, Honky Tonk Man, Jimmy Hart, the Road Warriors, the Ultimate Warrior, which went on and on and on, and then retired in '08 and started full-time running our family car dealership till present day. That's my 5-minute spiel.
Well, that's quite a story, and thanks to you, I will be interviewing Dale in May later on this month, I believe.
Oh my God,
the 25th! I can't wait for that because my goodness,
that should break attendance records because he has never talked for 25 years or 20 years since. Wow, that's awesome.
It's going to be a good one. So thank you for that. But why don't we start with the name game, starting with the promotion.
Really excited.
That you broke into or broke into the business. That would be the CWA, and I'll just run down the list of names and give me what you got. Starting with a guy that we never talked about in the earlier interviews for some reason, Jerry the King Lawler.
He broke me in, gave me my start. He thought it was a little bit of a goof back then. It was so nice that we reconnected with Dale Gagne's AWA Superstars. Jerry was on like 7 or 8 shows of ours. I was so proud to bring him into Delaware State Fair, where we had the Nitro Girls and the Nitro Singers. I remember they put up an actual a stage for the Nitro Singers, and we had 2 Nitro Girls. There was 5,500 people. Jerry Lawler was on top. I forget what 2, Brian Christopher. Okay, I will not talk this much about each person, but I love Jerry. Literally one of the most realistic wrestlers in the history of the wrestling business. And you cannot take that away from him. And how far he lasted, how long he lasted, and all of the the inventions of different booking to go that long in that territory. He is literally one of the icons of wrestling, and I love him.
Yeah, absolutely. And went on, of course, to a very successful broadcasting career. But what about his long-term opponent, Mr. Bill Dundee?
I like Bill. We had a program together in '90 that fizzled. I just seemed like he just wanted to beat me in the Louisville Gardens. It was weird. It was weird, but I like Bill. Again, another one of those, 5'7" and just hung in there for 25 years. Drew, you want to talk about I drew money? He literally drew big time money and a great talent, and really got the business from A to Z.
Next, Dirty Dutch Mantel, a guy who's also seemed to turned over into a new career in the podcast game, but for years a staple in Memphis.
Yeah, love Dutch. It was funny. Dutch and I did not have a lot of interactions when I started in '86 in Memphis. And when it seemed like a lot of guys were trying to get me out of the territory or just didn't like me, one of the biggest complaints is I smiled a lot. I mean, the wacky world of wrestling. As Vince Russo once said, I've never seen more uptight men in my life. Anyways, Dutch Mantell pulled me aside and hooked me up with Bill Watts. And he did not have to do that, but he must have saw something in me. He did not extend that offer to my tag team partner, Van Horn. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying, like, to separate us and pull me aside, to go on the limb, hand me the number for Bill Watts. I never forgot that. And I eventually went there with Van. We said this on our previous in the next following February for Bill Watts, and Buddy Landell warned me the card trips were ferocious. But to go out of his way and do that for me, I love Dutch. And another guy that just outlasted so many people in the wrestling business, and that's a feat alone.
Next is an individual I will be speaking with this week, Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. If you're watching this live on the 11th, and that would be Pat Tanaka, and I guess Paul Diamond as well. It's his birthday today, I think.
Will you please tell Paul that, I had some of my best matches ever with him. Pat Tanaka, this is one of the guys I have to speak a little bit. I mean, defined as a sweetheart, a little bit of a ribber, but funny ribs and stuff like that. Nothing malicious. Got the business. One of the best workers I've ever seen. One of the best bump takers I've ever seen. We were booked, and we were booked in Louisville Gardens and Lexington, but not in Evansville that Wednesday. So we had like a day off. I think they were trying to screw with us. Pat's like, no, you're going to stay at my condo that I share with this millionaire guy. It's this beautiful luxury condo. Pat comes back from Evansville. Instead of just going to bed, he stops at the store and buys his filet mignon steaks, and he buys hash browns and he toasts them as like the potato. I don't know why I remember that. And we all went into the hot tub, went back, and he cooked us filet mignon. Tanaka didn't have to do this for two rookies like me and Van Horn. I mean, one of my regrets is not keeping in touch with Pat. And he's such, and I think everyone knows what can tell by his interviews, kind, smart, so smart in the business, knew everything, every facet of the business. I cannot say enough about Pat Tanaka and Paul Diamond. If you could ever pass this message or play this clip, Paul, I love you. When you were my first program with the AWA, and I made you break character in the ring our first night when you smiled, and I knew I had you, meaning like we were going to be a great marriage. And that summer it was great being married to you that summer and working you so many times. I cannot say enough about Paul Diamond. So nice to see him out of the business and thriving and healthy, and that really makes me happy for both Pat and Paul. And I say hi to both of them. Love them dearly.
Yeah, one of the great underrated tag teams. I couldn't believe when I spoke to Pat how self-deprecating and humble he was, but definitely class act.
Right.
Next, the late great Tracy Smothers.
Love Tracy, just a complete gentleman. I never knew how tough he was because he was just such a little teddy bear. Not little, but he was such a teddy bear, so nice in the Memphis territory to me. When other guys were giving me a hard time, I cannot say enough about him. Just an awesome worker. Like so many of those guys from Memphis were just great workers. I love Tracy Smothers. I really do.
Jeff Jarrett, of course.
Mm, mm. I had the same Steve Austin Stone Cold interaction with Jeff in Evansville when I got my check. And he didn't, he made, I forget the comment he made, but it was like because we were in like these little stalls, like a dress, like a fitting room at a clothing store. That was the locker room. And I just remember looking at my check and I looked at Kerry Von Erich and I flipped my check around and Kerry's, like, you do with that? Go to the movies by yourself. And Jeff walked by and he saw the disgust in my face, and he's like, "What am I going to do?" So that's my rub with Jeff. But I love Jeff, and we started it 2 weeks apart from each other in the wrestling business, and obviously way more successful than I was. And Jeff had put himself in the right place in the right time. And if anybody thinks that I still have a little rub against him, I don't. I want to say publicly, and if Jeff should ever see this, when I saw Jeff Jarrett in that music video with My Baby Tonight, and he was buff and the long hair and he wasn't goofy country western singer, I swear to God, I shook my head. I said, holy shit, that guy was money. I think, in my opinion, one of the biggest flubs in the history of the WWFE and Vince McMahon was not making Jeff a semi-serious country music star. Maybe wrestle once every 7 weeks on TV, have him sing 3 songs, maybe have a live event. The posters, the foam fingers, the CDs, the cowboy hats that I could have sold and marketed if I was Vince McMahon, of Jeff Jarrett. Just from that music video, holy shit, Jeff, you were money personified. And I will never take that away from Jeff. And I think that's one of the biggest absolute flubs of Vince McMahon's history is turning Jeff into some ridiculous country western singer with big glasses instead of turning him into a chick magnet. Here's this good looking 27-year-old guy. I know he was lip syncing, could have sang 3 songs before every live event. You know, the amount of young girls that man could have attracted and procured their money, would have just been. I just would have made Jeff, like the mall, sent him to mall openings, or oh my God, did Vince make a big mistake? And I always want to say that publicly about Jeff, of what, just the millions of dollars that Vince did not make on that young man.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the friends of the show, Ibzan, is asking about the guy I was going to ask you next. Of course, Jerry Jarrett. How was he towards you, John?
One of the best minds of the business, to have a Southern wrestling promotion where kayfabe and keeping it real was tantamount, and you did that for 25 years, every week, the booking strategies, unbelievable. So one of the best minds ever in the pro wrestling industry, as a human being with no humanity. And I say that because my dad and I were business owners for 40 years. When you have to know that you're handing out $300 checks for guys traveling 600-700 miles a week in 3-4 states, and the very least you could do is every event, what was back in '90, a $12 bucket of 24-piece chicken in a case of Coke in the locker room, a deli tray that you got from Kroger's. You hearing that people like Stone Cold are living in their car, eating raw potatoes. The Undertaker's living in his car, and you're not, at the very least, providing some sustenance in the form of a deli tray or a couple of buckets of chicken every night, is to me monstrous. I'm sorry, no humanity. And Greg and Vern warned me about that. that they just it's we know athletes are treated like cattle, but down there, um, I did not respect the way Jerry um, shrugged off the utter hardships of his talent. And again, I'm not talking about getting us a tour bus, but a couple of buckets of chicken, some bottled water, or Coke, cans of Coke, or a deli tray. That would have cost $10, $15 for guys that were literally starving. You know, they called it the Slim Fast tour. I just that I'm sorry, that hillbilly Southern mentality that I hated. So I'll leave it at that. But a genius in the wrestling business.
Yeah, for sure. But his payoffs are the stuff of legend. Now, before
Well,
we get to your next territory, the Milwaukee-based WWA.
Indianapolis.
Sorry, Indianapolis. We've got a question that's kind of timely. Unfortunately, the news broke today that Sabu Terry Brunk passed
Yeah,
away. There's still no word on
yeah.
the cause or anything like that. Did you have any interactions with Sabu or stories thereof?
No, I didn't. But I remember he was going to go to Wings or one of my Asian tours. He was going to come aboard the following week or 2 weeks or something. That is my only interaction with him. But great worker, total innovator, one of truly the high flying or risk taking hardcore workers, and seemed like in his interviews, I watched a lot of his shoots, a very a decent person that got the business, and was functionally literate in what it took to be a human being in the wrestling business, and I will always credit him for that. And I really am so sorry for him and his family and his loved ones that he did pass, and our prayers are certainly with him.
Yeah, big shock for me personally, having talked to him and saw him in Philadelphia last weekend. Seemed to
Yeah,
be in good spirits and everything
yeah.
else. So, yeah, rest in peace, legend. Now, on to the WWA. Who would we talk about first, if not the Bruiser?
Uh, Great businessman, cheap as hell. But I admire a businessman that, he paid me when I bitched about trans. He took out a roll of $5 in nickels and handed it to me. That's a shoot. Um, but I like Bill Watts. He was a guy that knew what his bottom line was. And I respect that. And how he lasted from the 50s. He was truly the Midwest and the Midwest, Bruno San Martino, if not even larger. I think at one point, probably from the early 60s to the start of 1980, if you mention pro wrestling, I think 80% of the people in America would come back with Dick the Bruiser.
Mm,
It just other than the East Coast,
mm,
Bruno, it would be Dick the Bruiser. And he accomplished that with um, really one of the first guys, other than Gorgeous George, in my opinion, of creating this aura about him. The most dangerous wrestler, and what are you going to see when he shows up to your town? And that was, I think, carefully crafted by Dick. And he was one of the first people, I don't say branding, but he was branding the world's most dangerous wrestler. And to do that in the 60s before national, TV really took hold was amazing. And died way too young.
mm, mm. I guess Bruiser Jr. would be the next staple of
Oh,
that promotion.
one of my lifelong friends in the wrestling business. I still talk to him. We wrestled each other in '87 when I worked for Dick, and then he wrestled for us with Dale Gagne's AWA Superstars. When he would show up, you were like, I have a right hand man. I have another producer for me, because Dale was a lot of times in another town. Because we many times had two night shows, and so Dick the Bruiser Jr. was my associate producer on many times. Everyone liked him. He could play three characters. Not the greatest worker in the world, but he had the golden lion gimmick with the tail and the long gloves. How Vince McMahon did not sign him in '87 is completely beyond my understanding of the wrestling business. But I loved him, just a great guy. and still promoting a couple of shows here and there. So God bless him. But truly a guy that the wrestling fan, the WWF mid '80s wrestling fans should have seen. If you hired Bully Busick, you should have hired the Golden Lion. What a hysterical gimmick! I mean, it was just great.
Mm-hmm. And a guy that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, also made it to the AWA, the Russian Brute.
Yeah, again, another one of my best friends in the wrestling business. George and I, his name was George Petrowski, South Side Chicago guy, football player. We would drive together to Toledo to the TV tapings in Toledo. I have so many millions of stories. '99, him and I headlined Super Clash when King Kong Bunny did not want to put me over. There's a 20-minute shoot. Didn't want to put me over for the belt, so we replaced George, the Russian Brute, and I donned the All-American Kurt Angle stinglet to make it a USA Russia. And George broke his leg. I made it into the into the match where they constructed a temporary stadium. Are there any independent wrestling organizations that have temporary stadiums? Well, we did. Don Laughlin of Laughlin Casinos landed his helicopter in the parking lot. I'm not lying. George breaks his leg a minute. I look down. I'm like, what happened? He goes, I broke my leg. He goes, just pin me. I said, well, you're gonna break your leg in the ring, and I just like picked him up and I shoved him through the ropes, and he rolled out, and I did a splash on him and took him to the Laughlin Hospital, and just such hysterical. And the last story I could share is we're in a Holiday Inn in Fort Wayne, downtown Fort Wayne, or it was downtown Fort Wayne or South Bend or Indianapolis, I can't forget. And he comes back into the hotel room, he's stoop. That's South Side Chicago for idiot, dummy, affectionate, like idiot. He's like, Stoop, get your clothes on. I get out of bed. I'm like, what? He goes, Eddie Money's band's down in the bar. We're going to party with them. So I get dressed, and we party with Eddie Money's band for like 3 hours in the Holiday Inn bar. Hey, it was just awesome. Great guy. He died a couple of years back, and just love. I mean, there's a guy that had the Chicago, and people should know about this. The Chicago, the bad guys always had the eyes like this, like the fake Abdullah the Butcher, and it was so hokey Chicago. And I hated that about George, and I kept telling him, George, he wore these boots that went to his calf. It looked like it was his dad's boots he wore to work, instead of like the Russian, like the Nikita Koloff boots to right below his knee, and not be so like Chicago terrible heel, overacting, and just be like a stiff Russian. And he never would want to do that. So whatever. I love him. I love him. And George is the one where everyone left the AWA ESPN tapings. He somehow stayed, and they made him wrestle 3 times in a row because they ran out of heels. That's another story. But
wow, that's getting the most
Yeah.
for your money. Hey,
Yeah.
Guardian of Chaos, a friend of the show, says he can verify the Bundy story that you're talking about. He was there, and why don't you drop it on us, since we've got such demand. We're going to get to Bundy later, but why not now?
First of all, Guardians of Chaos. I love that guy. He drove down with us from Las Vegas. We never met him, but we heard so much about him, so we hired him for that show, and all the publicity. And there's a guy. This is a guy that wasn't a friend of ours or Dale, and that could say, "Oh no, these guys. You had your day contract. All your arrangements were spelled out. What you got paid who was picking you up at the airport, where you were staying, the phone numbers." He could attest, being a total impartial worker, how nice it was to wrestle for Dale and I. And he was a pleasure. He helped us on so much of the day before publicity, because we treated it like a little WrestleMania. We did a bunch of publicity tours, but his name was Big Daddy back then. I think if this is the same guy, and I love him. So Bundy and I are on the main event. He's going to drop the strap to me because I put him over in Oshkosh, Wisconsin at the Cope Arena. There's like 3,200 people. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying, like, it was a pretty big show. I put him over. Dale tells him, lay him into Johnny, joking around. And he literally went as far as you could without actually being a shoot in like 15 minutes. He killed me in the ring. It was actually funny. And now that it's later, but anyways, so he sells like $2,500 in merchandise, because we had like 2,200 people there. He's cleaning house and his brain is starting to rattle. And he's like, I'm a baby face. I'm not a heel. So we're in the locker room trailers, and he's going, brother, I just don't know if I should put you over. My mother and father are standing next to me because Dale flew them in to see their son main event a little mini WrestleMania. And my mom's like, what do you mean you don't want to put my son over? Like, this is wrestling. What are like we're arguing about who's going to be the clubhouse president. And I said, that's fine. Well, you're no longer the belt holder, and we're no longer going to book you. Anyway, I'm like, so then it's that conversation. I wasn't a jerk, and I wasn't throwing my weight around. I'm like, what are you going to do? They're expecting a title match, and one of the participants is me. And so, and we put him against somebody else. He totally screwed up. All of us getting the rest of the payday. Sorry. And I love Chris. I love Chris. And we gave him one more chance. Again, like Guardians of Chaos can say, he had a contract. Everybody from Jimmy Hart to George Steele to Slaughter, 15% of your merch goes back to Dale or the other promoter because we provided you with 2,500 people. You weren't wrestling in front of 300 people. I provided you a civic center with 3,000 people standing in line at the merch table. Yeah, you're going to give 15% back. Everyone did it. 8 years, we never had a problem with anyone with payoffs, ever with payoffs. And Chris refused to give us 15% to the Rialto Theater in Joliet. Killed the show. We had a 5-show package with them. They pulled the thing for like $210. We got destroyed by 4 extra shows, thanks to King Kong Bundy. We never used them again. We probably had 35 shows in our lifespan after he pulled that stunt. So who was who? If we were paying him $2,500 a shot, yeah, that would have been lowered at some point. But and you pitch that away for $250, and he calls my answering machine and leaves a scathing message towards me, like it's in your contract. You didn't pay them, So, but I'm John Stewart. I tell the truth. I love Chris. Got the business. He was clean. He always smelled good. He was a gentleman. He was a nice person. I loved King Kong Bundy, but he totally screwed us up on Super Clash 99 in the Rialto Theater, and we lost tens of thousands of dollars because of him for absolute stupidity. And you never showed up to one of my and Dale's events unless you had a contract, and that contract spelled everything from where you were staying to what time you were going to take a piss to how much you were getting and how much you were giving back. So, even with contracts, some of the boys just are impossible.
Yeah, and it happens to this day, even on a smaller independent level, and it kind of it's happened to me, and it kind of makes you shake your head. Last individual for WWA, the legendary, now legendary Big Papa Pump, Scott Steiner.
Oh yeah, first met Scott in Wheaton, Illinois. We were at a fair show. A lot of Dick the Bruiser shows were fair shows. Scott was nice. I asked him if he was on the Jews. There's probably a little tacky. But we were both starting in the business. And like I said to my interview, Scott was the shits. The only thing he had going for him was his body in 1987. Now, wait a minute. This is John Stewart here. Big Papa Pump, multi-cajillion-dollar moneymaker. Used the right way. I think Eric used him the right way. I think Scott's shoot promos were awesome. He got a little into the weeds and a little deep for the fans. Remember, don't confuse them. You lose them. They don't know what a writer is, and they're not into the office politics. But he had that Flair confrontation. And folks, go on YouTube and look up Big Papa Pump versus Goldberg. And you're going to tell me Goldberg's the shits? You watch that match. Scott Steiner was millions of dollars that somebody could have made with this guy. Not that they didn't, but I mean, a program with Goldberg, a program with Stone Cold. I mean, he was just freaking over body. He could work. Promos were awesome. I don't understand this business. I really don't, because Scott was a you'd have paid Scott $5 million a year. He would have returned that 10 times over. So that's, I
Mm-hmm.
just think he was one of the most underused guys. And I know he was a superstar. He could have been a megastar if he was used the right way. And I love Scott was so nice to me. By the way, in '90 in WCW, when I went on the road with them, him and his brother paid for 2 of my hotel rooms. I told you this. Hawk paid for one. Brian Pillman paid for 2. I mean, the Steiners paid for my breakfast, my lunch. I mean, just great guys. They're great
Mm-hmm.
guys.
Absolutely, and good to see the next generation in the ring right now
Yeah,
with
his
Ron
son.
Breaker,
Yeah,
and his son apparently is training
yeah,
too. Some good things to come
yeah.
there.
And hello to Scott if he ever sees this. Man, brother should have 20 million in the bank. Sorry.
Absolutely. What about the moving on to the UWF and starting with a very controversial individual? I was always a fan of his work in World Class, but sad end, gentleman Chris Adams.
Oh, um, you know, uh, 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 great worker with the right talent in the ring. I'm sorry, I'm just being honest. A little boring at times. Put in the right feud. His thing with Gino, tagging with Gino was great. I wrestled Chris also years later for UWF, and it was like rounds, and there was like 400 people, and nobody was doing. And I was moving, like just trying to create a little bit of action. And he got back to the locker room, and he confronts me in front of Terry Taylor, not in a bad way. And he's like, mate, what were you moving around so much in the ring for? And Terry Taylor snapped his head. He's like, this was nobody. This was silent. You wanted me to lay there? I mean, and make it even worse. And I wasn't being neurotic. I was just, kind of just moving a little. I just unbelievable. So, and then right after he did that thing on the airlines with the pilot or whoever,
Yeah,
I was in a car with him going to the hotel in Tulsa, and he gets pissy with the drive-in person. I'm like, oh my God, here we go, and it dissipated. But yeah, I could see his temper, but a great worker. Other than that, I don't have too much other to say about him. But I saw
yeah,
the temper. I saw the temper.
yeah. Especially allegedly with, or not allegedly, but the incident on the plane was due to
Yeah,
alcohol, and it sounds like
yeah,
his
yep,
downfall was too. So
yep,
sad story.
yep.
What about Dusty?
Oh, Jonnie Stewart, nice kid. I love Dust. I actually wrestled him in Tucson, huge crowd. I told you about a story where I had a suit on. He gave me the elbow, and as Honky Talk would say, when that fat fuck goes down, you're gonna know it. I love imitating Honky. By the way, King Kong Bundy imitating Honky Talk, man, was the funniest thing in the world. Anyways, and he bent my cufflinks. I'm wearing cufflinks today. Jack, I showered and shaved and put on my tie for you, and he bent my
Nice.
cufflinks. That's how hard the elbow. But what an honor to wrestle him, and one of the all-time legends. And again, what Vince did with him, I never understood. But Dusty worked through it, and made something out of it. But just one of the all-time icons.
What do you, just as an aside there, what do you think of, I'm assuming you saw the main event of night 2 with WrestleMania and his son Cody losing the title to Cena. Did you take in any of the controversy around that? Or
Look, Jack, in the business world, I'm very basic, and it's done me well, served me well. I don't get exotic. In the wrestling world, my thinking is relatively basic, kind of on a Cornette L. Snow thinking. So you have finally a breakout character, Cody Rhodes. I mean, I don't watch it them. I really don't. But obviously, WrestleMania main evented WrestleMania last year, didn't he? Or had a
yep, yep,
you have Cena leaving. You've turned him heel successfully. You don't. That is not the time to send the people home not happy. I'm sorry.
mhm,
It should have
mhm,
been a DQ or something.
agreed.
Cody comes back, boom, ba bing, ba boom. Cena fucking goes out of the ring after just getting destroyed in a flurry of a heated comeback. And now you're building up for another confrontation for the next year. You beat him in the ring. I don't know if it's a work or not. I don't know, and I don't care if Cody's not coming back or whatever. But you killed it. You killed. You had your heel beat the baby face, and you just turned the heel. You just turned the baby face heel, and you're already cutting off the match instead of a wicked comeback. And Cena's out in the ring, and like you and I this year, baby, you and I, and they lost it all. I think the WWE booking has been great. I just can't believe what they did. I not Monday Money Quarterback. I just never been taught in 35 years of pro wrestling industry that I've been in where you kill off really the entire angle and kind of your characters too to some degree. Oh, you're a heel and you beat him already. Well,
Yeah.
why am I buying a ticket? What am I going to see next Monday? I mean, you've already done it. So, am I making sense? I don't know.
Cody's nowhere to be seen lately,
Yeah.
so we'll have to see
How's that working out?
I don't understand it as well.
Yeah.
What about Windy City? Starting with the promoter. I know you touched on him earlier, but a few comments on Sam.
Yeah, Sam and I had a great relationship. Then it soured. He got a little pissy when I went to WCW and stuff. We mended our ways, and I actually ended up working for him again. And he is the Vince McMahon of Chicago. And I just find it funny. I just find it funny for anybody out there who's an indie wrestling promoter. The two most successful indie wrestling promoters without major TV, so put Paul out of those things. I don't care what you tell me, have been Dale Gagner, Gagne, and Sam DeCero that I can rattle off because I was there. 5,000, 52, 3,800, 4,000 people. What did Dale and Sam DeCero do that was so magical? Well, they did what Vince McMahon does: saturate a town with local publicity, radio, TV, personal appearances, quality marketing materials. Dale was surpassed the WWE in the graphic package of his posters, and Sam was on TV. Sam DeCero, a Chicago city worker, hired a PR firm to launch Windy City Wrestling. Okay? Smart. That's what Vince McMahon would do. So I find it funny that two guys, Dale Gagne, Sam DeCero, who totally emulated Vince McMahon, both had some of the largest independent wrestling houses in maybe the past 40 years. Why is that? Why? They didn't create magic. They didn't reinvent the wheel. They copied and modeled Vince McMahon. And for that, I mean, Sam, for him to draw 5,000, 52, and I think one was 5,700 at the amphitheater, and he had the oldest, longest running independent wrestling organization and school in the history of the wrestling business. Do I need to say any more?
No, and Windy City was quite a hot promotion.
Yes.
The magazines got a lot of coverage,
a lot
of buzz.
Yeah. Yeah, Bill Apter and Dave Meltzer followed Sam like he was ECW, so it was really cool.
Doing something right. What about?
Thank you for saying that. Right.
Absolutely. What about Buddy Rose and Doug Summers? What a great tag team they were. Perhaps the younger fans don't remember them, but what a great run they had in the AWA too. Here's
Sam. He puts Sonny Rogers and I as the Beach Boys over. We are in newspapers. The match you might want to watch tonight is the newest tag team, the Beach Boys. And then he takes us. Not only does he book us and promote us to the moon, he puts us with Doug Summers and Buddy Rose and the other two, Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose. I was getting my PhD in pro wrestling at 20 years of age. Why? Sam DeCero, Windy City Wrestling. Enough said. And great. They were all great guys. Just, you want to talk about old school, good, solid, intelligent wrestlers. Son, just, follow me, kid. Just, walk and talk and you call everything clearly definable spots, which is a problem ladies and gentlemen, back in the day. Sometimes you couldn't hear them. Sometimes they use different lingo. I tell you how I destroyed a night in WCW when I didn't know what 1-2 was when Kevin Sullivan said it to me. So clearly definable spots. I never got lost with them, even though I was a green pea. And they just put Sonny and I over both of the tag teams like $1,000,000. Cannot say enough about them.
Mm-hmm. Next is an individual who recently was profiled on Dark Side of the Ring, and Ibzan is talking about Eddie Gilbert. I know that that episode wasn't entirely correct or complete historically, but what was your experience with him?
Yeah, I idolized Eddie. All of the wrestlers in the 80s dressed like schlubs. I'm sorry. I'm just letting you know, other than Nick and Ric Flair. Bell-bottom jeans with gym shoes and J.C. Penney's striped shirt. You look like Ole Andersons. I'm just being honest. They were not fashion. And it always bothered me. All of a sudden, Eddie Gilbert comes into the locker room with Windy City Wrestling. Acid wash jeans, the snakeskin cowboy boots, the Halliburton, the kind of the half shirt over the belly button, the sunglasses, the tan, the Rolex. I'm like, oh, the Louis Vuitton purse. I'm like, me. I want to be him. And we gravitated towards each other. He was awesome to me. He helped book in Windy City, so he did great booking for me and Sonny Rogers. And when I went to Windy City, according to Paul Dangerously and according to Jim Cornette and according to Jim Barnett, Eddie fought tooth and nail for me to not get my contract rescinded by Ric Flair or pressuring Jim Herd to rescind my contract. And I always respected that. I have nothing bad to say about him. And what a great worker. I loved his bumps and left us too soon. I love Eddie Gilbert.
Next, appropriately enough, Paul E. Dangerously, Paul Heyman.
I think. Wait, I'm going to stop so we can do a meme. In my opinion, I am the only pro wrestler in history that claims that Paul Dangerously never lied to him. So,
wow.
Yeah, Paul and I traveled a lot together with Windy City Wrestling, and we were very close. He helped me get back to WCW when I got my contract rescinded. He just never lied to me. He was going to bring me in for wings. He told me to call him the next week. I never followed up because I heard horror stories from the Texas Hangman about Sandman and all the drugs. And they're like, you didn't like wings. You are not going to like ECW locker room. And I never followed up with Paulie, but I mean, the guy is an animal. He has lasted so long. One of the greatest minds, greatest promos, one of the greatest bookers I'm saying this because, I have nothing to do with them. I don't need him for anything. I'm just speaking the truth. He's one of the greatest minds in the business. And always thought his stories because we would hire ECW talent and they were like, the check didn't come from Paulie because he said the FedEx office in Dallas caught on fire. I mean, so we would get stories nonstop of Paul's shenanigans. I wasn't financially involved with them, so I thought they were kind of funny, even though that might be callous. Hey, when you're up against the ropes, you got to do a lot of maneuvering and a lot of shuffling and tippy two-stepping. But Paul's one of the greatest minds ever, and he never lied to me, and I respect that about him. And we really got along. And I would be shocked if he did not have a mutual reciprocation for what I just said about me, because we were totally simpatico.
Wow, that's definitely a unique perspective. What about a guy who had a former tag team champion in the AWA, Mr. Electricity, Steve Regal?
Right. You should have been a politician. Any shoot interview, stays on message, doesn't throw anybody under the bus. Awesome worker. Why he never went back after the drug testing with Vince? Why he didn't go back to Crockett and stay there for 20 years? I mean, what? Why would you fire Steve Regal? That's like saying, why would you fire Tully Blanchard? I mean, great body, tan. He was tall, 6'1.5", football background. One of the best workers ever. Gets the business. Never caused problems. I just and then Steve and I worked together in the car business together. He was a rep for GM at the auction, so we would see each other at the auto auctions, and that was kind of fun. Steve Regal, just one of the truly great underused workers in the business, in my opinion.
Yeah, a guy I've tried to get an interview with for years. He's definitely on my bucket list for that. What about a man maybe some of the fans aren't familiar with, but definitely made his mark, Christopher Love?
He's the only person I ever no showed, and I'm embarrassed. I mean, I'm proud to say that, and I'm embarrassed to say that because that's not my personality. But he booked Sonny Rogers and I. Here's when sometimes you just have to stand up for yourself for what's right. And there is no. I am telling the truth about this very quick story. He's got a great show in like let's say in the Northwest Indiana area. Sonny Rogers and I are on top. There's about 1,200 people. It's packed. You know, that seats 2,000 people, but it's hot crowd. We're with the Kelly brothers, or we work an angle. The crowd is freaking crazy. This is an independent show. He sells like 250 tickets that night for the return match with the Kelly brothers. And of course, we got a gig. And I just simply asked him, Chris, a week before we were going to do the show, what's our payoff? We got to, we're not coming in the main event. I think he sold like 1,600 tickets. We're not going to gig, cut our head off, and draw you all this money with the Kelly brothers, and you're going to hand us $100. I mean, at some point, I got to demand, even if it was 150. I'm not saying 300, but 300 would have been accurate. And he goes, I'm going to pay you what I'm going to pay you. I hung up the phone, and I made Sonny Rogers no show, which was disgusting. We should have just went there, took the $100 or whatever it was, and that was wrong of me, but right of me. But you know, I respect Chris for his staying power in the business, but for the shenanigans and the financial scamming that he did, I don't have respect for him.
Moving on to the AWF, what about starting with Mr.
I'll
Tom
be quick.
Brandy, Sal
Oh,
Sincere?
I just texted Tom after 7 years about 3 weeks ago. If I started a wrestling promotion and I wanted a guy that would just be my consigliere, the guy that would just analyze the situation, not have anything involved, any psychological issues, and come to me and say, "Here's what's going on. Here's my opinion. Here's the couple of things I think you should do." Um, Normal, nice guy. I worked him a bunch of times. There is nobody better in the wrestling business than Tom Brandy as far as a human being, a man, a merchandiser. We used to call him Brandy Mart, like Walmart, because he'd have two 8-foot tables of merchandise for Dale and I shows. And I just love him. I love Tom Brandy. He's just a great, great guy, a gentleman, and just gets the business on an Al Snow, Jim Cornette level that not many people do. And would be how he was not the Johnny Ace with Vince McMahon. And he's not an ass kisser, so that's probably why. But Tom Brandy could have done a as good or better job than Johnny Ace, because Tom is not afraid of people and confrontation and tells it like it is without being a jerk. There is nobody better in the wrestling business than Tom Brandy. I mean that.
And a great shoot interview as well. Terry Taylor.
I love Terry, and it's one of my biggest mistakes of not cultivating a relationship with him. And I saw one of the greatest live wrestling matches ever, Terry Taylor versus Chris Adams in Tulsa, and just another guy with staying power in the wrestling business. And from my dealings with them, which is very, very brief, I really I think I was the Northern Terry Taylor, the suits and stuff and whatnot. And I wish I would have cultivated a relationship with them, starting with the UWF.
Why do you think he's got this pervasive reputation of? Well, he's even got the nickname by Conan. They call him Terry the Stooge Taylor,
Yeah.
and it seems to dog him with that reputation all the time. Was he
Do you
not
want
in
me to be
talent
honest?
relation? Yes, please.
Okay, I've never had to deal with this. So when 15 wrestlers tell me the same thing, because he was a stooge, and probably he didn't probably, and I'm speaking for him, and I don't care about that, but he probably didn't enjoy doing what he did. But we're all sharks in a little fishbowl, and if that meant keeping his job or being good with the office, you know, and if it's a difficult, because I have been a booker with Dale for 8 years. You can't do anything right. You can't please anyone. And if my job, part of my job is to tell you who's doing cocaine, who got into a bar fight, well, that's my job, you know. And that's all I can say in the service. I don't know what other deceivious or things he did to people or went behind their back, or, I think Bobby Heenan's truthful about his relationship with Terry. But we're in this fishbowl, and I'm not condoning anything. It's like we're forced to lie. We're forced to be backstabbers. We're forced to be vicious with one another, and that's the byproduct of at times a horrible symptom of being a professional wrestler. And because Terry's a very smart guy, very smart in the business, and he was known as the Stooge because he was a stooge, most likely. I don't think all these of my colleagues are lying, and he was suffered from the byproduct of being a booker and a producer in the office. It sucks.
Yeah, difficult position. I always understood that was, like you had pointed out, kind of his job. He was in talent relations or whatnot, and that was his job.
Yeah, it was my job to tell Dale, don't hire this guy again. Why? He did this. Oh, okay, you're done. Does that make me a stooge? Now, if I go to Rowdy Piper, don't worry, I'm not going to tell Dale that you got pills or you were late for the show. Then that is bullshit. But I shouldn't make those promises to the boys, and I didn't. It's like I always told when I was booking for 8 years all around the country for the AWA Wrestling Superstars, it was, if you don't want Dale Dale and the other promoters to know what you're doing wrong, don't do it, because I will. It's my job to give them. I would fax Dale a Vince McMahon the notes of the show. He did good. He was a pissy attitude. I don't want to see this guy again. I keep hiring this guy. That was my job. Not only producer, music, wrestling 3 times, picking people up at the airport to tell Dale Gagne what the F was going on behind his back when he was in another town or couldn't make the show. Sorry.
Before we move on to WCW, Guardian of Chaos is asking if you have any Freebird stories.
Oh my God. Michael Hayes and I are in a VIP room at Stayouts in Chicago. Folks, this was like the vampire graveyard of nightclubs in Chicago where all the boys went. It was open till 7 a.m. And Michael's watching my match on TV. And I am a little inebriated. And it's Butch Reed, me, Michael Hayes, and somebody else and me. And I'm going to Michael Hayes. And I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to work my ass off. I'm a good wrestler. I don't care. And he goes, damn it, will you shut the fuck up? I'm trying to watch if you're a good wrestler. Right now, you're one of the biggest pains in the ass in the business. And I'm like, Michael is best friends with Tom the cabbie, who is not doing good physically. Tom the cabbie is a famous roadie and taxi cab driver for the boys in the 80s and 90s. And the Freebirds adopted Tom as their little brother. There was a famous story where it was in the wrestling business that they took his taxi cab from Chicago and drove it to Fort Worth, Texas. But that is not the story. But I love Michael. I don't know how he books wrestling every week. I don't know how he writes it. I don't know how you do it. His brain has got to be fried. I have so much respect for him. I really do. And I'm glad I've never tried to get a job with him or call him. I always kept our relationships sacred because he was best friends with one of my good friends, Tom the Cab, and he treats Tom great. And I got a lot of respect for Michael Hayes.
So in WCW, might as well start with Kevin Nash.
I agree with him. I'm 6'10". I'm good looking. I give awesome promos. What do I got? Do you think I want to buy a ticket and see Kevin Nash do a hammerlock or an armbar? No. I want to see him do a promo. I want to see him walk to the ring. I want to see him destroy somebody or finally somebody getting the big guy. Kevin Nash only has 5 moves. So did he draw money? Huge money? Little reality check when Kevin and Scott Hall came to WCW, business did tenfold. They went from losing money to making $30 million. Yes, booked into a great storyline. But do you think if 2 other wrestlers were booked into that Invasion storyline, they could have pulled that off? Kevin's realistic shoot semi-shoot promos to the business, to the boys, to the office. Holy shit. Ignited a 30, $40 million run of WCW. Is anyone taking that away from him? And listening to his shoots now, he just makes a lot of sense. He's very, he's as a contemporary. He makes a lot of sense about life, investing, the wrestling business now. I think he's super honest, which I really respect. I'm so sorry to hear about his son, who I never met. But I was with Kevin in 89 and 90 when I would do Chicago shows for WCW, and he would always complain he's driving a 200,000-mile Cadillac, and he's right. You take a good-looking guy that's 6'9", you put him in a green Oz costume. Again, if you hear me ever talk bad about the wrestling business, it's not bad. It's the utter confusion of some of the decisions that have been made in the past 50 years. It's utter disbelief. And do I think he was money as Diesel? No. But somebody, Eric Bischoff and Kevin Nash himself, developed a hardcore shoot style persona, and it drew millions of dollars. Never take that away from Kevin.
Just quickly, what do you think about his comments with respect to the whole Vanilla Midgets deal that he got such heat for when Benoit, Malenko, Saturn, and I guess
you're not going to like this. Yeah, you're not going to like this.
Please go ahead.
Hey, one thing I could say about myself, I was a fan in the early 80s. I bought tickets to wrestling in the early 80s. So I think my opinion's valid. I want to go see dinosaurs and cartoon characters. Don't look like my next door neighbor. When I see a guy that's 5'5", 6 or 7, walking down the aisle in a major facility, a major arena, and you have Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. I mean, are you kidding me? And Chris and Eddie Guerrero and Malenko did with little stature is incredible, especially what they did with Vince McMahon. My personal philosophy is you should not be in the main event because you don't fit the physical stature of an entertainer in the wrestling business, which is giving the fans someone that doesn't look like their next door neighbor. And I'm sorry, Kevin and that Chris Benoit's height totally diminished. Like, well, geez, if a 5'7" guy can be the heavyweight champion, how difficult was? That's just my opinion. I am one of those guys. You need to look like a wrestler. You need to look like an ex-linebacker that came from the NFL that's in the wrestling business. You need to be taller than my neighbor, wilder looking than the guy at the local bar. And I just didn't see that in those guys. And yet they were some of the best workers in the history of the business and made tons of money for Vince. And that's a credit to Vince and them. But I do agree with Kevin wholeheartedly. If I was booking, they never would have saw anywhere over the mid card, unless I wanted to, have one of them go against the giant like Kevin Nash or somebody and do a David and Goliath type thing. But that booking only lasts a couple of months, and so I agree with Kevin.
I couldn't agree with you or Nash more. I think that airport test that Vince McMahon talked about holds a lot of credence, and I do.
Right.
Think that if the guy looks like your neighbor or he's working at the IHOP or whatever down the road, it takes away from the credibility of.
Yeah, I mean, I was 6'1". I wasn't a tall guy either. I think Eric Bischoff even thought he was, our guys, but I was 6'1", 6 3/4 with wrestling boots, 6'1.5". Blonde hair, I was 235 in my heyday. I mean, I looked like I was an outside linebacker for the Oakland Raiders. I mean, I didn't, you looked at me and went, oh, you got to play football. Or with the blonde hair, he's got to be a wrestler. Then when I wear cowboy boots, I'd be 6'2.5". So, and you see a guy that's 5'7", and he's a little, stocky bodybuilder. It just doesn't do it for me, my personal taste.
Agreed.
What about? I'm certainly not buying a ticket to go see that.
Exactly. What about the natural Dustin Rhodes?
I like Dustin. Did a great job with Gold Dust. I was with him in the locker room with WCW when I did the Chicago shots. Nice guy. I like him. Good guy.
And a phenomenal worker from the way that history regards him. Gone too soon, Brad Armstrong.
Now I'm going to put myself over here. So Brad, guys like Brad Armstrong, the Italian Stallion, Tim Horner would watch AWA in the hotel rooms the afternoon before they would go to a show. So all of the undercard in WCW knew me, knew my character, knew my catchphrases, the spoiled rotten on my trunks. So Gary Juster books me against Brad Armstrong, my first spot show appearance at the UIC Pavilion in Chicago for WCW. First match, you should be, just go out and do Jonnie Stewart. Brad didn't know what to expect. We go out there. Boom, 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 boom. Walk and talk. There are 40 people in the audience that know me, friends of mine, and they are chanting. And the rest of the crowd is now getting into it like, why should we hate this guy? And even they nobody saw me on AWA. And now the arena is getting into it. And Brad's like, what the fuck is going on? And I'm like, come to the center of the ring. So we do a little bit of a steer up. Now Brad's thinking, the fuck? I'm getting put over here. You know, I'm getting treated like I'm Ric Flair. And I put Brad Armstrong over like I do and did everyone else. I remember I did a snapmare. I was twisting his neck. The crowd died down, and I yelled to the crowd, first match, shouldn't do this. Is this your hero? The fucking place, because they love Brad, went up for grabs. You son of a bitch, you're going to... And I kept saying, I'm going to break his neck. And Brad... So anyways, put him over like $1 million, like my job. We go back to the locker room, and he's got his head down. And I'm like, what's wrong? He's like, that was fucking great. What the fuck? Why are you not here? You know, like, I'm in this opening match. I'm Brad Armstrong. I'm going to go over on some guy. And I gave him a match. I gave him his due credibility that Brad should be given. And fuck if it was an opening match. I don't give a shit. I got that crowd up. I got that crowd into it. And most importantly, Brad Armstrong, I made sure that they knew he should be one of their heroes. And I did my job.
Did you get heat for that for going into business?
Too bad he's gone.
Yourself?
No, I did not. No, I did not. No, I did not. But Brad was like, Jesus Christ, why are you not with us? And it just, it was great. And it's so easy to work, so good. I mean, Brad Armstrong was so fluid, just like Bobby Eaton, that it was scary. You're like, can I ever be this fluid? Can I ever be this good? Can I ever be this motion? You know, this motion that doesn't look like you're trying. Oh my God, folks, trust me, Brad Armstrong, holy shit, what a good worker. And I love putting him over.
Absolutely. What about this this character who is quite controversial again in the last few years, had a lot of enemies, I guess, in the business due to his executive functioning in WWE. That would be Johnny Ace.
Well, I love Johnny Ace. He actually, when he came back from Japan before he started with Vince, called the AWA offices looking for a job because he knew Dale, because he was with Dale and Billy Jack's or Portland Wrestling. And I like Johnny, but I never had to deal with him. You know, I never had to have a $500,000 contract and be under his tutelage. And so that's where it ends. And in 2000, I called the office because we had a problem with booking Kane. But I didn't leave that message. I said, Johnny, it's John Stewart. Give me a call back. And he calls me back and leaves a message on my AWA voicemail. Yeah, if you want to try and work here, you know, just send us up tape, Johnny. And send you up a tape? The fuck are you talking to? First of all, I'm not trying to get booked. I've got, that rubbed me a little bit, but he didn't know what was going on. And, Johnny was there to protect Vince, to notify Vince like a Terry Taylor. And so when Jim Cornette, who had legitimate feat of shaving that guy's head and sending him down, they're on the track of what am I going to do for WWF, not Ohio Valley. That doesn't make it right. But I understand having this one track. I can't worry about anyone else. So I like Terry Taylor. I feel for Johnny Ace, but I was there for 8 years too. The job sucks. The
Mm.
job totally sucks of being a booker.
Can you check your schedule and come back next week at this time, because I want to finish off with Wings, but I really want to get into deep dive on the AWA
Sure.
superstars and some of the other stories. If you can't do it next
No, I
week,
can't because I thought we were actually doing it next week. So I've got that. I've got it open. Yeah, my fault, not yours. So I've got
perfect.
Sunday afternoon open next week. So you're booked if you want to do another
Perfect.
segment. Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%. I find our interviews to be so fascinating. Let's close out this one with
Okay.
Wings, starting with a guy that actually worked last weekend in Philadelphia at
Okay.
TWA One and Done as part of the Memphis Mafia with Tommy Rich. That would be Doug Gilbert.
Hillbilly piece of shit. Good worker. Uh, I told you about the stupid mindless ribs that he pulled on me in Wings. Probably one of the guys giving me Halcyon. Maybe not, so I shouldn't indict him. You know, the worst haircut on a human being I've ever seen. And I say that like you're an entertainer. You know, you should look cool, not like you got. You know, I never understood that about him, but just hillbilly mentality. Great worker as a human being, a total piece of shit.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because one of the individuals that I actually met in person last weekend was Ryder Infante, the big bad wolf. He's an ECWA worker. He had quite a good career. He also has heat with Doug Gilbert, and I
Yeah.
laugh because he said basically the same thing when he ran into him last week. So seems to
Yeah,
be
I
a
mean, you
connection there.
expose the business with that ridiculous child pedophile shoot angle. So all of this Memphis, keep the shoot, Johnny Stewart, keep the kayfabe, and then you go expose the business on your way out for a self gratification. F you on the way out. And this is a guy that's the brother of a man I idolized, and the son. Um, I'm sorry, and folks. Uh, Doug Gilbert's dad was Tommy Gilbert, the one of the most realistic pro wrestlers in the history of the business. He had promos like he was your next door neighbor yelling at you. Doug Gilbert. So, you know, when I cut down Doug Gilbert, I say that unfortunately because his father and his brother were two of the best realistic pro wrestlers ever. But Doug to egg on to lead to strand me in Tokyo, Japan, or somewhere in Japan, and fuck with me in the little stupid gimmicks instead of wanting me to make money with him, you know, 12,000 miles away from home. Hillbilly piece of shit.
Well, we're definitely going to be bringing up your assessment with Ryder this coming Tuesday for Ryder's Wrestling Review. Definitely a polarizing individual. Next, Bill DeMott.
Another great worker, a great trainer, and an absolute freaking bully. I saw it. He was with Doug Gilbert when they were drugging me and then motherfucking me and screaming at me in my ear as I was drugged 12,000 miles away from home for no reason because for no reason. And I'll be less harsh on Crush because I worked him a bunch of times. We had great matches. He's a great hand, great worker, but a total bully for, I could just see like this was how he was raised by his dad. And I don't mind saying that. And I do want to say from my heart, I feel horrible about what happened to his daughter. Nobody deserves that. And so my prayers, just from knowing him for that week in Japan, my prayers go out to him. But, a great worker, but an absolute total bully for just for no reason, and shouldn't have been and got fired from training. Was appropriate because I know exactly what the gimmick was with him. He's just a bully, demoralizes, demeans, yells at people, and it's no place for that in this business.
And wasn't he doing that thing with the donut, the naked donut thing too? That was kind of strange. Do you remember hearing
No,
about
no, I don't. He was just Hugh Morris, or Crush. He was Crush in wings. We had great matches. We had 2 or 3 matches. Great worker, light as a feather, but just an absolute bully. And that disqualifies you. And for what? We're all here to make money, to get along, to help each other, to guide each other. Certainly, Doug Gilbert and Bill DeMott and Corporal Kirshner should have taught me the ropes or what to do, what not drug me, told me to go back to my room when they saw me getting drunk. And instead of that, drug me even more and then had Corporal Kirshner break my jaw 12,000 miles away from home. What
Yeah.
a lovely trio. Sorry,
Yeah.
I speak the truth. What a great worker. He's a great worker, Bill DeMott.
Yeah. No place for that at all.
No, it's ridiculous.
Lastly, for this edition of the name game, what about Victor Quiones?
Cold, slithering snake. Uh, uh, a weird homosexual. I'm the least homophobic person in the world. I marched 3 times as a politician in the gay pride parade in Chicago, but just a weirdo homosexual. Weird, slithery, serpent-like, cold, not friendly. Hitting on the Japanese wrestlers in front of everyone, stroking their hair. Just a weirdo. Uh, Good promoter, I guess. I guess, but just gave me the Jeffrey Epstein vibes. And I don't mean he's a pedophile, but he was just a weirdo. Whether he was a homosexual or heterosexual, I'm just saying, not really matters, but he was just a freaking weirdo and exploited his homosexuality towards a lot of the Japanese wrestlers who he had under control, and that's exploitive.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like Japan, and I know we discussed this in one of our earlier YouTubes. It was just a disaster.
Oh my God!
Just
How
about.
about this? How about taking Jonnie Stewart under your wing and making money with them?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same 5 guys that have been fighting each other, working with each other in wings for a year. You got a new guy coming in. How about integrating him so you could make money? Because isn't that just what we're here for, to make money?
Mm-hmm.
Just a shark pit, jealousy fest, and just horrible people, horrible experience. I am so lucky to get out of there alive. I really am. Because Corporal Kirshner seemed like he tried to kill me. So
Yeah, most definitely. Maybe next week we'll start off with that one to touch on. But before we close this one out, I wanted to ask you: do you think a lot of that, because of all the facts that you've laid out here, it's supposed to be a cooperation? You're there to make money. You're supposed to, put on a good performance, but not try and kill someone. Do you think a lot of this jealousy and stuff is based on a rampant paranoia about protecting their spot and not helping anybody else, like the opposite that Terry Funk did in ECW?
yeah, God, Jack, that's a great question. Look, Jonnie Stewart comes in. I'm in mildly good shape with the Gino Hernandez body. I got the $1,400, $1,500 robe. It's like nobody expects it, but like with wings, you've got the hardcore matches. Here's this little Gino Hernandez, Jonnie Stewart coming in. He could work with all the Japanese middleweights and lightweights. But I don't want to be in your main event with baseball bats and barbed wire. And I made that known. I made that known in the locker room. Like that's not me. They put me in a cage match with barbed wire. I'm like, whoa, And instead of saying, hey, this guy could make us money in the undercard or the semi-main events, working with some of the older Japanese Olympic style wrestlers and all of these young kids, because I had a great match with that silver medal guy, Pan Am Games, the older Japanese guy, a great match for the MMA light heavyweight championship when they did all the governors and the roses in the ring. I wasn't your competition. And so what do? You get me more drunk so I can make more of a fool out of myself, and then get mad at me for making a fool out of myself because I'm drunk, but you're the one that got me drunk, Sorry,
Yeah.
just horrible. You Doug Gilbert, Bill DeMott, horrible human beings. Great workers, horrible human beings.
Yeah, that's definitely unfortunate.
Sorry.
That's the truth as you see it, and I respect once again that you tell it that way. before we let you go until next week, and that's going to be a blockbuster edition, just looking at the names that we have to cover. If the fans wanted to reach out to you, where would they do that, John?
Yeah, I give my personal email. I'm really great about answering emails. Somebody's going to take the time to write me, no matter what you want to tell me. I always respond. And it's my full name, spelled a little weird. John, Jon, my middle name, Alan, Alan, and my last name, Stewart, Stewart. Don't laugh at me, at AOL.com. I know I'm an old guy. I know. So John Allen Stewart at AOL.com. And the response for the past two times I've been on the show has been unbelievable. And I really, it's overwhelming. And I really appreciate it. I really do.
Well, I want to thank you, the illustrious one, for your time today. Looking very forward to next week for the second ever edition of the Cheap Heat Productions podcast here on the Cheap Heat Network, featuring yourself. And we're going to go into a discussion to lay the groundwork for Dale Gagne coming on, but all those great stories that you have from AWA Superstars. Yeah. A promotion that I think a lot of fans will be very interested in raising their awareness of, checking the stuff out, and absolutely looking forward to getting into that. But until then, thanks very much for coming on tonight.
Jack, thank you for having me. Sincerely, thank you to your listener viewers. It's been really the past two times I've been on this. The response has been great and heartfelt. And for a guy that doesn't do a lot of these and kind of is out of the wrestling spotlight, and it really is overwhelming, the response from people. And I just want to tell you from the bottom of my heart how much I appreciate it. And thank you for having me on.
Well, fans, that's it for this first edition of the Cheap Heat Productions podcast, a new era here on the Cheap Heat Network. Looking forward to bringing you many more such interviews, starting with part 2 with the illustrious Jonnie Stewart next week. Until then, fans, thanks for watching. Thank you for watching this video. Please give it a like if you enjoyed it. Be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Cheap Heat Productions. Don't forget to hit the notification button, and you won't miss any of our upcoming interviews, recurring programs, or entertainment products. Thanks again.